Hola, me llamo Abby y mis amigos Nicole, Ashley y Tiffany. Nosotros hablamos ahora y Mexico. When most people think about Mexico, they might think tacos, tequila, and the beach, but we're here to tell you that there is so much more to the culture behind it. The Mexican people are so fortunate to live in a place where there is so much cultural history. Everyone from the Aztecs, the Mayans, and the Incan natives, to the Spanish conquerors, and even modern-day influences like ourselves in the U.S. have impacted their culture very greatly. Today we will be discussing topics like the religion, their race, their languages, food, the region of their country, their clothing, and even more. We truly hope that you enjoy this presentation.
Hello, I'm going to talk to you about race. So there's a variety of different kinds of races mixed into the Mexican culture. But there are four primary races that I'm going to focus on. And these are white, Spanish, indigenous, American Indian, and African. So before 1521, it was mainly Aztecs and Mayans who were the indigenous people to Mexico. When the Spanish conquistadors came in 1521, though, they introduced the Spanish and the French and the European into Mexico's gene pool. Now, when the triangular trade came about, they brought slaves over to work in the silver mines, and that's how Africans got introduced into the gene pool as well. And over the years, through intermarriage and intermixing ethnicities, it created a really diverse gene pool throughout Mexico. Social class. The upper class are Creoles, and they make up 9% of the population in Mexico. These people are mainly of Spanish descent, and this is saying like their ancestors came straight from Spain. And that's a big deciding factor on social class in Mexico, is who your ancestors were. Creoles control a lot of the property and a lot of the wealth within Mexico. And they also have many more advantages compared to other classes. Like they have better education, better health care, more input on politics, and they have more cultural opportunities. Next are the Mezquitos, and these are the middle or working class. They make up about 50% of the population in Mexico. And since they're the working class, they're mainly small business owners, employees of those small businesses, civil servants, and union members. The Mezquitos are really similar to the middle class in the U.S., meaning like they have one or two cars, they live in houses or apartments, and they have access to education and to healthcare facilities. Lastly are the Indignas, and this is the lowest class. They make up about 40% of the population in Mexico. And this is primarily Amerindians or natives of the land whose ancestors were born in Mexico, and they were like the Aztecs and the Mayans. These people are all in poverty. They live off $2 or $3 a day, which is not a lot to get by on. And because they don't make very much money, they're limited to poor education and poor health care. And a lot of these people are born into this lower class, so due to the lack of upward mobility, they're there their entire lives, which passes on to their children and their children's children. So it goes down through generations of people being in the lower class. And the last 1% of the population is people of Afro-Mexican descent.
I'm Nicole Ammon, and I'm here to talk to you about the language of Mexico. Hola, ¿cómo te llamas? Bien. I just said, hello, how are you? Good. Mexico is 92% Spanish, although the Mexican Constitution protects indigenous language, so people have the right to preserve and enrich their languages. In 2003, the Mexican Congress went a step further by recognizing indigenous language as a national language and determined that they have the same validity as the Spanish language in Mexico. Some of the languages, such as Mayan, So if you plan a vacation or plan on going to Mexico for a cultural, vacation as well, you need to brush up on some of your Spanish prior to going. 6 million speak other languages and are in danger of disappearing, which is why they try to protect the language as it currently is for their culture. Hola is go to websites, to learn language, to learn what that word means, and also to research other categories of Spanish language so you can get around. You will need to know how to get around in your transportation from town to town. You'll also need to know how and where to find food and drinks when you're down in Mexico. God forbid somebody gets hurt while you're down there, you might need to know about health and safety and how to get to first aid. So when you're traveling around in different cities such as Buenos Aires and Baja California, keep in mind that it'll be very useful for you to learn some of these words of the Spanish language. The reason for mannerism in Mexico is to show respect, as we once did here in America. They showed an example of how we behaved and showed respect to one another in our society in the 1940s and 1950s, is how they still have in their culture today in Mexico. So you will always be addressed as Senor, Senorita, or Senora, which means you are married in Mexico. Please and thank you for everything. They are really strict about that in Mexico. The Mexico mannerism is very formal. From the poorest of the poor to the rich of the rich, they will always address you as sir or madam. Respect is given in all ages in Mexico. It is given from male to females, from females to males, from the young to old, and old to young. In our culture, we talk and move around with our backs turned. Not in Mexico. They consider this to be very rude. It is all about respect down there. If you are not treated with respect, just turn your back and walk away. But by far you will be respected when you're in the culture of Mexico. Also, Mexicans give a light handshake as opposed to what we're used to here in America. We give a nice, firm, confident handshake is how we've been taught and how we learn. Mexicans value their time with family and business. They love music and eating with family and friends. It is very common in Mexico to sit down at dinner time for about 2 hours and to enjoy your food and you enjoy your conversation with your family and friends. Mexicans also dress very formal when they go out to the restaurants for dinner. As opposed to us here in America, we are pretty casual dressed. So leaving directly after eating a meal is considered to be very rude in this culture. So that's why they sit and enjoy one another's company and chat for a few hours. The social norms do vary from place to place in Mexico, just like they do around the world. Mexico's flag is in 3 different colors, as you can see. The green means hope and victory. The white is purity of Mexicans' ideas, and the red is the memory of the blood shed by the nation's heroes. What you can see in the middle is a symbol, and it represents an eagle and a pear cactus plant with a snake in its mouth. And how that symbol came about was there was a bunch of water down in Mexico, and as the water went down, they formed some land and causeways, and they had thought they had seen something like the snake in the eagle's mouth when the causeways and the land started to rise. So that stuck. The snake stuck with the eagle's mouth on the symbol of their flag. Art and literature. Art is an integral part of the society in Mexico. Mexico is known worldwide mostly for its folk art traditions. Some notable handcrafts are the clay pottery, made in the valley of Oaxaca, and the bird and animal figures, they are made in the village of Tanala. Colorfully hand-embroidered cotton garments, wool shawls, and outer garments And colorful baskets and rugs are seen everywhere throughout the whole entire country of Mexico, as the picture shows. The history of literature in Mexico dates back to the Mesoamerica time of the continent.
When most people think of religion in Mexico, they think of El Cristo Rey, or the Christ the King. This is a 20-meter high statue that stands atop El Cubillerte, which is a 2,700-meter high hill or mountain, as it is known. The statue has been here for hundreds of years. However, it has been replaced one time in 1944, according to whatguanajuato.com, because it was destroyed by the non-practicing unreligious president of the time during one of the very last battles of the Mexican Revolution. People visit this beautiful statue mainly to see the vast, open, and truly liberating plains that surround it. Religion really controls many aspects of life and culture in Mexico. Talia Wagner once said that much of the culture revolves around the church and religion, as also the family and inclusiveness comes from the religious aspects. People follow a system of hierarchy within their families where respect is truly given to every elder member. So children respect their parents, adults respect their parents, grandparents, and so on. The dominant religion of Mexico is Catholicism or Christianity. It was originally introduced by the Spaniards during their time of conquering. It replaced the native religions of the different indigenous groups that were focused around worshiping many gods with different kinds of violent sacrifices and other things of the sort that the Spanish people just didn't feel was right or necessary to be within a religious cultural aspect. The current denominations in Mexico include Presbyterian, Lutheran, Baptist, Jehovah's Witness, Mormon, and Anglican. As with any country around the world, other lesser religions have sprouted up in small communities, and some of those today include the Jewish, Muslim, Buddhist, and even atheist groups within this country. The main thing that religion affects is the holidays. It's very dominated by them. Holidays are celebrated with great enthusiasm, and there's always a lot of planning and effort that goes into these celebrations. There's even sometimes special clothing, special food, and required rituals that the people will celebrate. The most widely celebrated holidays include Dia de los Muertos, which is on November 2nd, pictured here. It's a time when they choose to really celebrate the lives of their past loved ones by decorating their graves in these extravagant displays and having large picnics in the cemeteries and just spending time celebrating the lives of the people that they have lost. Next comes the Feast of Our Lady of Guadalupe, which is a commemoration of the time when the people believe that the Virgin Mary appeared to a man in the city of Guadalupe in Mexico. Then comes Los Posadas, which is the time frame of the Christmas season in Mexico between December 16th and January 6th. Christmas Day, of course, is December 25th when they celebrate the birth of Jesus. However, the children do not receive their presents until Three Kings Day, which is on January 6th, as it was in the Bible when Jesus received his gifts. Next comes Carnival, which is a huge countrywide celebration leading up to the five days before the Easter season starts. They also celebrate Semana Santa, which means Holy Week, during the time between Palm Sunday and Easter Sunday with extra religious celebrations and services and things of the sort. Next, I will be talking to you about the food in Mexico. It's always been very traditional food. So some of the main staples have always been corn, beans, peppers, tomatoes, squash, sweet potatoes, herbs, and spices. People also used to occasionally hunt for rabbit, turkey, deer, and quail just to kind of add to the substance of their diet. However, when the Spaniards came, they introduced raising livestock for food. They brought over the use of cattle, goat, sheep, pigs, and chickens into the diet. Now, the more current staples include all of the previous, plus mango, papaya, pineapple, Naples, pork, chicken, different kinds of chocolates that are naturally grown there, chilies and spices, and even some American soda pops have been more integrated into their special diet. But one thing that is special is that all of these things are generally grown in Mexico. They don't have a lot of importation for their food. So some people think that spice is a staple in Mexico, but honestly, it's not natural. It's something that they simply enjoy. Most spices are handmade at home and passed down through recipes from mother to daughter in the kitchen when they're doing special occasion cooking or other things like that. Some of the most famous recipes that I find very interesting were mole poblano, which is a spicy sauce made from natural chocolates, tamales, which are a meat steamed in corn husks, often made in America as well, barbacoa, which is meat that is wrapped in a mog leaf and buried within hot coals to cook. These would be the tamales that I just spoke of. So the mealtime in Mexico is very unique. They follow more of a European system than our typical one here in America. El desayuno is first, which means breakfast, between 7 and 10 a.m. It's generally a light to medium meal, including coffee, fruit, bread, yogurt, and even sometimes eggs within a tortilla shell. Then there's a while until la comida, which means lunch. It is between 1 and 4 p.m. and usually the longest and largest meal of the day. It's began with an appetizer, followed by super salad, then a meat dish served with beans, rice, and fresh tortillas. It's also generally followed by coffee and desserts, with quite a while to sit and talk and catch up and relax with friends and family. Then comes la cena, which is typically spent at home around 8 or 9 p.m., sometimes lasting a bit longer, but it's generally a very light meal with just like something like soup or tacos that's quick and easy to be made right at home. However, if you decide to vacation in Mexico, you definitely don't have to follow these staples. People decide to visit Mexico simply because it's beautiful. It's an amazing place to spend some time getting away, truly relaxing and not worrying about the hustle and bustle of average life. Some of the top 10 places to vacation in Mexico are Playa del Carmen, Oaxaca, Cozumel, Tulum, Guadalajara, Puerto Vallarta, Zihuatanejo, Mazatlan, Cabo San Lucas, and San Miguel de Allende. These places all generally share a few common characteristics. They're either a coastal beach region or an island. They include upscale retail and giant resorts. They have a totally fun and hip nightlife, and most of them also include some historic cultural attractions that really pull people in from a different kind of point of view. On average, there are nearly 20 million annual vacationers in Mexico, and generally, about 18 million of them are from America, according to StatisticBrain.com.
Hello. So far we've talked about Mexico's food and religious holidays, but we haven't actually touched on the regional location of Mexico. Mexico is located in between the United States and Belize, and Guatemala. The climate in Mexico, if you go to travel, is oftentimes hot and wet. The Tropic of Cancer happens to go through Mexico, so your hot and wet season will go through May to October, but the hottest and wettest will be through June through September. Throughout Mexico, there are also deserts and mountains. It really just depends on if you're inland or toward the water. Mexico is also made up of 31 states. Now, when we hear about Mexico, we often think of stereotypes, as we do with everything. Now, a couple of these stereotypes may include people who are dirty or smelly, but in fact, these stereotypes are quite false. It really just depends on the social class of the person, as it does here in America. A survey done in 2008 by the SCA also concluded that with 500 men and 500 women, Mexicans often shower daily. Can you imagine living in a place where it's very hot and wet, unlike Michigan? We are very cold here, so we take showers maybe every other day. But Mexicans actually
prefer to stay clean and smell good, so they take one almost every day. And they also feel very self-conscious and anxious about their personal hygiene. 61% of these people in the survey said that they would rather clean their hands before they eat or before cooking. Actually, 9 out of 10 wash their hands before eating. And it just so happens that 8 out of 10 wash their hands before cooking. Now, comparing this to the US, which is about 7 out of 10, Mexicans also rate number 1 on the survey for cleanliness in the household. It just so happens that 80% of Mexicans in this survey say that they clean their house twice a week. The US is actually in the 6th position. Now, Mexico is a land full of traditions and goes back many of years. And the buildings in Mexico reflect this. Many of the buildings can be up to 400 years old. With this comes things that are 400 years old, including the pipes for plumbing. Now, a lot of the pipes in the older buildings are made out of red clay. So if you are visiting to Mexico, you're unaware of the social norms there, it's oftentimes normal to put your used toilet paper into waste baskets instead of flushing them down the toilet. This just so happens to be a norm there because of the rough interior of the pipes or the low water pressure that they have. It also has to include the cellulose that's in toilet paper, and much of the bacteria that can break it down. Also, if visiting Mexico or you plan to stay there for a while, it is advised that you don't drink water or you don't eat food that may have the water in it. Also, you may come through a filter. It may be safer, but water can oftentimes be cloudy or unclear and not safe to drink. Now, the fashion in Mexico dates back many of years, way back to the Aztecs. Traditional clothing in Mexico is made to keep cool in the hot climate. Now, women's clothing traditionally is made of cotton, but when they were civilized by the Spaniards, they were introduced to silks and wools. Oftentimes you'll see embroidery or images or patterns, and these are symbolic and they always mean something. One of the other things that we're very familiar with in America is the charro. It's seen here. It is tied to agriculture in Mexico, and it oftentimes is substituted for a tuxedo. You may also recognize it from mariachi bands or just any type of TV show that may include Mexicans. It's very elaborate with embroidery and beads and silver buttons, and it can range from anywhere from this elaborate to just simple. And included in the charro is a sombrero, which we all know fairly well. It's a wide-brimmed hat, and it actually is from the word sombra, which means shade. And you may also see chin straps attached to this hat. This has to do with the agricultural part of the outfit. They actually used to wear the chin straps because of riding horses to keep the hats on their heads. Here pictured is a woman's tunic. It's called a huipil. And we also are very familiar with ponchos. Another form of a poncho may be a serape. It's a crossbreed between a poncho and a blanket and a shawl. And this is a very traditional China poblana. It consists of a white shirt and a shawl and a wide, colorful dress. An interesting story about this dress actually is where it originated from. There was actually an Indian slave who was owned by Chinese masters who was captured by pirates and taken to Mexico in the 19th century. And since she was Indian, she was very familiar with the sari, and it's much like a shawl. And through this, she refused to wear anything but her original clothing. So Mexicans adapted this clothing, and you oftentimes see it in traditional festival clothing or any other type of holiday. You also have your huarache, traditional leather sandals, very popular even in America. Modern fashion is also an interesting topic. Mexicans actually used to be known as very unfashionable just because of their traditional clothing, but it so happens that nowadays, because of Carlo Fernandez or designers such as Ricardo Seco, you see things such as the Charro suit. And what happens with this suit is that Carlo Fernandez researched much about her heritage and her original traditional Mexican clothing and found out that much of times they were made out of patterns of triangles and squares. Also included in this, you have Ricardo Seco, who incorporated beads, hand-beaded New Balance sneakers, which are very popular nowadays. But other than that, modern fashion also is very typical, very close to American standards, and very much popular. This whole entire topic and New Modern is embracing their heritage and finding ways to be of their tradition and be in the modern world.
As you can conclude, Mexico is rich in culture and tradition. It has one of the largest populations, over 100 million people, which makes it the largest country of Spanish speakers of any other nation in the world. Everything in Mexico has a deep significance for the citizens and for the country, from the colors of the flag to the food and the family and the clothing. As we learned today, the variety of races, white and Spanish, etc., and the social class with the mestizos, the middle class being the largest, the Spanish language of the music that they enjoy together, and also the meal times, the length of it, and the culture that is very normal, the colorful garments and the clay pottery that you see everywhere in the country of Mexico, the religion and the holidays with respect to their families. The dominant religion is Catholic, as we learned today. The holidays that include Christmas on December 25th, in which we are accustomed to here in America. However, what makes it unique and different in their culture is on King's Day, January 6th, they open gifts, the children do, in the country of Mexico. Also the food that is dominant, the corn, the peppers, the beans, tomatoes, and spice. The vacation Mexico is like Cozumel, the region with 31 states. The great hygiene, ranking #1 in the world in Mexico. The wonderful fashion like the poncho. So if you get a chance, we invite you to go check out the country of Mexico yourself. Thank you for listening.